Imagine. Just picture yourself sitting in a quiet, drafty study somewhere in Scotland. It is late summer, 1945. You turn on the radio, and a crackling broadcast announces that a single bomb has just erased an entire Japanese city. Just completely leveled it. You are a strict, lifelong pacifist. But as you listen to these horrifying details, you realize a chilling truth. The mathematical language that made this apocalyptic weapon possible, it came from your own brain. It is a staggering weight to carry, but the tragedy deepens. Now add to this scenario that your own brilliant protégé, the man you mentored and trusted in your very own lab, is about to be exposed as the spy who handed these exact blueprints directly to Joseph Stalin. If we rewind a bit, you have already had your greatest scientific breakthrough, stolen by another student, the man who won the Nobel Prize for your work. You have endured your wife carrying on an open affair with your colleague. You have been stripped of your homeland, your citizenship, and your dignity by a fascist regime. It is wave after wave of trauma. And yet, amidst all of these betrayals, you somehow find the grace to spend 40 years passionately debating the nature of God and the universe with your best friend, who just happens to be Albert Einstein. Decades later, your granddaughter will be in a recording studio, laying down the vocals for the song Physical, becoming the global pop icon Olivia Newton-John. It is a life trajectory that completely defies any standard logic. If submitted as a script to a studio executive, they would reject it for being far too contrived, completely unrealistic. There is simply too much historical gravity concentrated in one single human life, but every agonizing, revolutionary, and bizarre detail of it is entirely factual. Welcome to another exploration on Legendary Lives Unveiled. If you find yourself captivated by the hidden shadows and untold tragedies of history's greatest minds, please take a moment to subscribe, like, and share this video. Today, we are pulling back the curtain on one of the most consequential, yet paradoxically overlooked figures of the 20th century. Max Born. We are not merely reading a timeline from his personal letters, scientific archives, diaries, and historical manifestos. We are dissecting the architecture of a mind that literally dismantled our classical understanding of reality, while his own reality was constantly being dismantled by forces he could not control. When we speak of Max Born, we are fundamentally talking about the death of certainty. This is a man who mathematically proved that the universe, at its most granular subatomic level, operates on pure, unpredictable chance. Like a roll of the dice, he proved that absolute precision is a physical impossibility. And yet, the profound irony is that he spent his entire 74 years on this earth, desperately trying to construct some kind of moral order, trying to find some predictable goodness in a world that was literally tearing itself to shreds through 2 world wars, bitter academic betrayals, and the dawn of the nuclear age. He found chaos in the atom, and he lived through chaos in the streets. To understand how he arrived at the epicenter of this storm, we must look to the streets of Breslau in the late 19th century, then part of the German Empire, now Rokopol. The young Max Born was not a robust, confident prodigy charging at the world. Born in 1882, he was incredibly fragile, physically and emotionally plagued by asthma and general frailty. But the real structural damage to his childhood came when he was just 4 years old. His mother, Margaret, died, creating a profound echoing void. His father, Gustav, a highly respected professor of anatomy and embryology, tried his best to step into that void and insulate Max. Then tragedy struck a second time. When Max was just 17, before he even had the chance to step into adulthood, his father passed away suddenly. The 2 primary pillars of his existence had vanished, completely destroying the predictability of his home life. This double bereavement deeply shaped his worldview. From his father, he inherited a fierce love for music and poetry, which would later bond him so closely to Einstein in their violin duets. But he also developed a deep-seated allergy to rigid, dogmatic authority. He absolutely loathed the military and organized religion, seeing them as artificial constructs demanding unthinking obedience. Instead of falling in line, he revived the medieval German tradition of the wandering scholar. He bounced from Heidelberg to Zurich and back to Breslau, chasing intellectual curiosity rather than a fixed career path. Eventually, that wandering brought him to Göttingen. In the early 20th century, if you wanted to decode the universe through pure numbers, Göttingen was the undisputed center of the world, the Mecca of math. It was ruled by intellectual titans, men like David Hilbert and Felix Klein, the high priests of mathematics. Upon arriving, Born realized he was a brilliant mathematician, but he lacked the singular, abstract genius of a Hilbert. He wasn't quite on that god tier of pure abstract thought. So, he tried his hand at experimental physics at the Cavendish Laboratory in Cambridge and later in Breslau. It was an unmitigated disaster. The man who would rewrite the rules of physics was a walking hazard in a laboratory. During one famous incident, while running an experiment, he accidentally ruptured a high-pressure cooling water hose and completely flooded the laboratory. His supervisor pulled him aside and told him he was a nice young man, but he was never, ever going to be a physicist. Yet, this hilarious footnote pushed him exactly where he needed to go. Born realized his unique superpower lay in translation. He had an incredible ability to take bleeding-edge mathematics and apply it directly to the baffling, messy problems emerging in theoretical physics. By 1921, physics was experiencing a total system failure. Appointed as the director of the Institute of Theoretical Physics at Göttingen, Born inherited pure chaos. The beautiful clockwork universe of Newtonian physics was falling apart at the seams because of the atom. The Bohr model, which treated the atom like a tiny solar system with electrons orbiting the nucleus in strict, predictable tracks like planets, was failing. Experimental equipment revealed that electrons weren't behaving like planets at all. The spectral lines of light they emitted did not match the math. The scientific community was in sheer panic. In 1925, Born hired a brilliant, intense 23-year-old assistant named Werner Heisenberg. Suffering from a terrible bout of hay fever, Heisenberg retreated to Helgoland, a barren, pollen-free island in the North Sea, to clear his head. He returned to Göttingen and handed Born a highly theoretical, incredibly dense paper. Heisenberg had decided to throw out the solar system model entirely. His pitch was strictly empirical. Science should only be based on what we can actually observe. We can observe the light an atom emits or absorbs during quantum leaps from one energy state to another. But there was a terrifying mathematical problem in Heisenberg's framework. Because he was tracking transitions with initial and final states, his variables had two indices, leading him into a mathematical nightmare. In standard grade school math, multiplication is commutative. 3 times 4 equals 12, and 4 times 3 equals 12. But in Heisenberg's new atomic math, multiplying position by momentum meant A times B did not equal B times A. The order changed reality. Thinking he had made a fatal error and his paper was garbage, Heisenberg handed the manuscript to Born and fled town on a previously scheduled trip. Born was left completely alone in his office, staring at these weird, non-commutative multiplication rules for days, losing sleep. Then, at the height of his exhaustion, a lightning strike of genius hit him. He remembered his old math professor back in Breslau, Jacob Ruzanis, teaching him an obscure, highly abstract algebraic concept called a matrix. A matrix is a grid of numbers And when you multiply two matrices together, the order absolutely matters. It is inherently non-commutative. In 1925, physicists did not use matrices. They were the esoteric playthings of pure mathematicians. But Born, the wandering scholar, had the exact tool required to decode Heisenberg's intuition. Needing help with massive calculations, Born pulled in another brilliant student, Pascual Jordan, a wizard with matrix algebra. In a frenzied sprint of just 60 days, Born and Jordan translated Heisenberg's rough framework into the rigorous, systematic language of matrix mechanics. During this intense, sleepless collaboration, Born derived the foundational equation of modern quantum mechanics, the commutation relation, written as PQ minus QP equals H over 2 pi I. This is not just a string of letters, it is a fundamental statement about the limits of human knowledge. It mathematically proves you cannot know everything about a particle at the same time. To measure the exact position of an electron, you must bounce a photon of light off of it. That physical impact fundamentally alters its momentum. Gaining certainty about its position destroys certainty about its momentum. The act of observation irreversibly changes reality. This single, elegant line of mathematics is the DNA of the quantum world, so profoundly important that it is literally carved onto Max Born's tombstone. When Heisenberg returned, the three published the famous three-man paper. Yet, this collaborative triumph birthed an ultimate academic betrayal. In 1932, the Nobel Prize in Physics for the creation of quantum mechanics was awarded solely to Werner Heisenberg. Born and Jordan were completely excluded. Science is about public relations. Heisenberg was young, charismatic, and had aligned himself with Niels Bohr in Copenhagen. Together, they marketed the Copenhagen spirit aggressively. Born, suffering from chronic nervous exhaustion, lacked the temperament to fight for his credit. Furthermore, the physics community hated the abstract difficulty of matrix mechanics, marginalizing Born's contribution as a mere computational trick. Born fell into a deep, crushing depression, silently watching his student absorb the glory. Heisenberg himself harbored guilt, explicitly writing to Born in November 1933 about his bad conscience for receiving the prize alone. Born maintained painful public grace, internalizing the devastation. But Born did not retreat. He pivoted. In 1926, his rival Erwin Schrödinger published wave equations using beautiful, familiar continuous calculus. Schrödinger argued that electrons were literal physical waves of matter smeared out through space, desperately trying to bring classical physics back to the quantum realm. Born, having studied the scattering collisions of free electrons, knew this physical explanation was fundamentally wrong. In 1926, Born shattered the universe by introducing the statistical interpretation of the wave function. He declared they were not physical waves, but probability waves. Schrödinger's wave function only gives a mathematical probability of where an electron is likely to be found. This was a philosophical earthquake. Before this paper, science rested on determinism, the Newtonian dream that strict cause and effect could predict the future. Born took a sledgehammer to that 300-year-old dream, proving that at the fundamental subatomic level, cause and effect breaks down entirely. Shoot an electron at a screen, and the universe itself does not know where it will hit. Reality is reduced to a casino, a statistical average of chaotic quantum coin flips. This realization terrified Albert Einstein. Despite their deep affection, exchanging poetry and confiding in each other, Einstein's belief in Spinoza's God demanded strict knowable causality. In December 1926, reacting to these probability waves, Einstein wrote arguably the most famous quote in physics: "God does not play dice." Einstein thought probability was lazy, a cover for human ignorance. But Born refused to back down, telling his idol that his demand for causality was a time-bound human prejudice. Born built an empire on this physics in the late 1920s, transforming Göttingen into the epicenter of the quantum world. He nurtured the minds that would define the atomic age: Robert Oppenheimer, Edward Teller, Enrico Fermi, Paul Dirac, Wolfgang Pauli, Maria Goeppert-Mayer, and John von Neumann. Yet, his private life was a portrait of psychological torment. His marriage to Hedy was incredibly turbulent. Shockingly, Hedy was carrying on a long-term, highly visible affair with a mathematician at Göttingen named Gustav Hergolats. Born knew. He endured the humiliation, adopting a stance of profound passivity. The man who mathematically proved the universe is built on unpredictable chance was utterly paralyzed by the unpredictability and emotional chaos of his own marriage. And while he buried himself in his equations to escape the chaos in his living room, the darkest political forces of the 20th century began gathering right outside his laboratory window. In January 1933, the descent into fascism was shockingly fast. Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany, and within months, the regime passed the law for the restoration of the professional civil service. It is a sterile, bureaucratic name for a law whose sole, malicious purpose was to systematically purge Jews and political opponents from universities, courts, and government positions. Max Born was immediately caught in the crosshairs. The bitter irony is that he had desperately tried to assimilate. Back in 1914, he had officially converted to Lutheranism, partly to please Hedy, whose family had Protestant roots, but primarily to remove the professional barriers that existed for Jews in the German Empire. Born was not religious. He famously stated that religious professions and churches are a matter of no importance. Furthermore, he was a decorated veteran of the First World War, having served his country faithfully by developing sound-ranging techniques for German artillery. Under the initial drafts of the Nazi race laws, frontline veterans were supposedly exempt. Born thought his baptismal certificate, his military service, and his Nobel-caliber brilliance would protect him. But fascism does not care about logic. The regime was obsessed with bloodlines. Because his parents and grandparents were of Jewish descent, he was classified as a racial enemy. This moment represents the violent, tragic death of the German Jewish assimilation dream. Families like the Borns truly believed that by embracing German high culture, mastering Goethe and Beethoven, fighting in the trenches, and elevating German science to global dominance, they had proven they were unequivocally German. The regime's response was brutal. Your cultural contributions are irrelevant. Your blood pollutes the state. In May 1933, Born was summarily suspended from his professorship. The intellectual utopia he had painstakingly built at Göttingen was dismantled almost overnight. His colleagues either fled or turned a blind eye. The regime eventually revoked his doctorate and stripped him of his German citizenship. This brilliant mind, who had just mapped the architecture of reality, was suddenly a man without a country, frantically writing letters across Europe, begging for a job to feed his children. He managed a narrow escape to Cambridge, England, securing a temporary, poorly paid lectureship at St. John's College. But it was a precarious, terrifying existence. His health deteriorated, and he was desperate for a permanent sanctuary. In 1935, a lifeline appeared from a deeply unexpected place, Bangalore, India. The Nobel laureate C.V. Raman, one of the greatest experimental physicists of the era, had recently taken over as the director of the Indian Institute of Science, the IIEISC. Raman, a fierce nationalist, saw the horrific brain drain in Europe and recognized a once-in-a-generation opportunity. to catapult Indian science to the global stage. After a brief correspondence, Raman immediately offered Bourne a 6-month position as a reader in theoretical physics, intending to create a permanent professorship for him. In the winter of 1935, Max and Hetty Bourne traveled to Bangalore. It seemed like paradise. Hetty's diaries describe Raman in his traditional Indian dress and turban as looking like a prince from the Arabian Nights. Bourne revitalized the physics department with brilliant lectures, immersing himself in the institute's life. But human nature and academic politics are toxic everywhere. The English faculty at the IISc and the broader British colonial establishment deeply resented C.V. Raman. They were furious that an Indian man was directing the institute. When Raman proposed creating a permanent chair of mathematical physics specifically for Bourne, lawfully funding it by reallocating money saved from a delayed water supply project, the English faculty pounced. They formed a coalition with Indian professors, alienated by Raman's demanding style. The colonial government brought in the Irvine Committee, which predictably sided with the English faction. Raman was humiliated and forced to resign his directorship. Bourne's permanent chair was categorically denied. He was caught directly in the crossfire of colonial racism and academic backstabbing. Heartbreakingly, the friendship between Bourne and Raman was destroyed over a scientific dispute regarding crystal lattice dynamics, how atoms vibrate inside a solid crystal. Raman insisted the vibrations occurred at specific, discrete frequencies. Bourne, using rigorous mathematical analysis, proved they formed a continuous spectrum. Bourne was mathematically correct, but Raman, his ego deeply bruised by the loss of his directorship, attacked Bourne's work aggressively. Thoroughly disillusioned by the caste system, the British colonial divide, and petty betrayal, Bourne left India. He was stateless once again. But then, the universe finally rolled a winning number. Charles Galton Darwin, the grandson of the Charles Darwin, was leaving his post as the Tate Professor of Natural Philosophy at the University of Edinburgh. He asked Bourne to succeed him. Bourne accepted immediately, taking the post in October 1936. Edinburgh provided the permanent foundation he had desperately sought, and he would remain there for 17 years. He officially became a British citizen on August 31st, 1939. The timing is chilling. Exactly one day later, Hitler invaded Poland, and World War II erupted. Because of his German background, Bourne was viewed with suspicion and excluded from the highly classified British atomic bomb project, known as tube alloys, which would later integrate into the American Manhattan Project. This exclusion was a profound relief to the pacifist Bourne. He wanted nothing to do with weaponizing his beautiful mathematics. But this brings us to an agonizing, morally complex chapter. While at Edinburgh, Bourne took on a brilliant young German refugee assistant named Klaus Fuchs. Fuchs had fled Nazi Germany not just as a refugee, but as a radical, committed communist who had actively fought Nazi thugs in the streets. Bourne and Fuchs formed an incredibly tight bond, treating Fuchs almost like a surrogate son. Together, they co-authored 14 complex scientific papers on quantum mechanics and statistical thermodynamics. When the British government invited Fuchs to join the top-secret tube alloys project, Bourne passionately counseled him against it. Bourne told him that perverting the pure pursuit of scientific truth to build a weapon capable of incinerating a city was a violation of their duty to humanity. Bourne hated Hitler, but he could never bring himself to slaughter tens of thousands of innocent civilians. Fuchs, driven by a violent, ideological hatred of fascism, did not listen. He left, joined the British Atomic Project, and was eventually sent to Los Alamos, New Mexico, to work at the heart of the Manhattan Project. But Klaus Fuchs was living a double life. Believing no single capitalist nation should hold a monopoly on world-destroying power, Fuchs became one of the most devastating Soviet spies in human history. He systematically handed over the deepest, most highly classified atomic secrets, including the detailed critical blueprints for the implosion mechanism of the plutonium bomb, directly to KGB couriers. When Fuchs was caught and confessed in 1950, the devastation for Max Born was absolute. Hetty wrote in her diaries of the physical toll it took on him. Born's quiet, peaceful laboratory in Scotland had incubated an extremist who handed the ultimate weapon of mass destruction to Joseph Stalin's totalitarian regime. The myth of value-free science was obliterated. Born realized that scientists could no longer hide in ivory towers. They were directly responsible for the survival of the human species. Before Born could launch his final crusade for world peace, the scientific establishment finally balanced the scales. In October 1954, word reached a 71-year-old, recently retired Max Born that he had been awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics for his 1926 statistical interpretation of the wave function, sharing it with Walter Booth. The archival letters note a specific, quiet satisfaction. Matrix mechanics was a messy collaboration, but the realization that the universe operates on probability was a conceptual leap he had made entirely alone. It was finally etched into history. With his Nobel Prize secured, Born made a decision that shocked his peers. He and Hetty moved back to Germany, settling in the spa town of Bad Pyrmont. Albert Einstein was absolutely appalled. He wrote a blistering letter to Born, calling Germany the land of mass murderers of our kinsmen, and argued that stepping foot on German soil was an affront to the victims. Part of Born's return was practical. The West German government offered a full pension, and Hetty deeply missed her homeland. But philosophically, Born rejected collective guilt. He refused to believe every German citizen was a murderer. He wanted to believe in redemption. Einstein never accepted this reasoning, maintaining his vow never to return to Germany until his death in 1955. Born did not return to fade away. He weaponized his Nobel prestige to attack what he called the prostitution of science for war. In 1955, he signed the Russell-Einstein Manifesto, organized by Bertrand Russell, a blunt warning asking humanity, shall we put an end to the human race, or shall mankind renounce war? Born actively drafted the Monroe Declaration alongside Otto Hahn, securing signatures from dozens of Nobel laureates to warn the world about hydrogen bombs. He became a primary founding member of the Pugwash movement, bringing scientists from the capitalist West and communist East together to bypass politicians and seek nuclear disarmament. How did a theoretical physicist become a leading political philosopher of peace? Born looked at the fanaticism of the Nazis, the communist absolutism of Klaus Fuchs, and the terrifying rigidity of the Cold War, and saw one poisonous thread: the belief in absolute certainty. Born wrote, "I believe that ideas such as absolute certitude, absolute exactness, final truth, etc., are figments of the imagination. The belief in a single truth and in being the possessor thereof is the root cause of all evil in the world." He used the mathematical laws of the subatomic world as a psychological blueprint for saving humanity. Reality requires looking at things from multiple perspectives, what Bohr called complementarity. It demands a high tolerance for ambiguity. If we could accept that our social and political truths are probabilistic, we might stop slaughtering each other. This legacy of healing manifested physically in his own family line. His son, Gustav Born, served as a doctor in the British military and was sent to Hiroshima. Walking through the radioactive rubble created by his father's physics, Gustav channeled that historical trauma into medical healing. He became a world-renowned pharmacologist, inventing the aggregometer to measure how blood platelets clump together. This led directly to modern antiplatelet therapies, saving millions of lives from heart attacks and strokes. The quantum randomness continued with his daughter, Irene, whose own daughter grew up to be Olivia Newton-John. Dominating MTV and starring in Grease, Olivia utilized her massive platform to become a fierce advocate for cancer research, building wellness centers, and fighting for environmental protection. She carried the Bourne family trait, using your position to advocate for humanitarian healing in a chaotic world. Max Born mathematically proved that the universe operates on pure probability. We cannot, definitively, predict the exact path of an electron. And his life is the ultimate macro-level proof of his own quantum theory. A frail, grieving boy from Breslau translates the secret language of the atom, has his ultimate prize stolen, mentors the minds that build the atomic bomb, and the spy who steals it. He watches his utopia crushed, is chased out by colonial jealousy, and through it all, maintains a profound, enduring grace. He forgives his wife's affair. He forgives Heisenberg. He forgives Germany. He proved that even in a universe governed by blind chance, you can still choose to aim your life toward peace. If you enjoyed uncovering the dark, hidden truths, the academic betrayals, and the incredible resilience behind Max Born's journey, make sure to subscribe to Legendary Lives Unveiled, leave a like, and share this video with someone who loves exploring the deep intersections of history and science. What part of Born's unpredictable life surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below.